Environment, Sustainability, and Parks. We are here today to discuss three different dockets, docket 1404, 1520, as well as 1588. We are joined by Matt Bradley from the Department of Public Works and Carl Spector from the Environment Department. We will have a third administration official, Aldo Guerin from the Parks Department, joining us shortly. I'm also joined by my dear colleague and friend, the District 2 City Councilor, Ed Flynn. Welcome, Councilor Flynn. And this is a public hearing that is being televised and broadcast on Comcast, RCN, Verizon, as well as streamed online. We ask all folks in the chamber to please silence your cell phones and take any conversations outside. If you would like to testify, please sign in the sheet at the back of this chamber and make sure you state your name and affiliation or your residence. And I'll ask all members of the public who wish to testify to please limit their comments to a few moments so that we can ensure that all concerns and comments can be heard. You can, of course, also submit written testimony by visiting our website or emailing ccc.ep@boston.gov. We're going to get into docket 1404 first, which is a message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $570,000 in the form of a grant for Climate Ready Boston awarded by the Barr Foundation to be administered by the Environment Department. And Carl, did you want to take the lead on that?
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. So yes, this is a 2-year grant to support our general work around climate adaptation, Climate Ready Boston, and implementation of the Mayor's Climate Resilient Boston Harbor Plan. It will support both staff and some consultant expenses. This supports our ongoing work to develop neighborhood plans. Currently, in the next few months, we'll be finishing up our neighborhood plan for downtown and the North End. We have just started our planning for Dorchester, and probably next year we'll be moving back to address the areas of East Boston and Charlestown that we did not cover in the first East Boston Charlestown report 2 years ago. This will also support our work in expanding our work to address rising temperature and the heat island effect and local flooding from more intense precipitation.
Great. So I think I presided over a grant several years ago, and the first focus, as you mentioned, was East Boston, Charlestown, obviously probably the two most vulnerable neighborhoods in the city of Boston, the coastal city like Boston. And that's been expanded to the downtown North End, and Dorchester's on the docket for next year?
That's correct. You know, as we put into our citywide Climate Ready Boston plan in 2016, the intent was then to move neighborhood by neighborhood to do detailed planning for sea level rise and coastal flooding. And as you correctly said, we started with East Boston, Charlestown. We put that out 2 years ago for sections of those two neighborhoods. Last year, we put out our detailed plan for South Boston, and as I mentioned, downtown. We'll be finishing up in the next few months, and we have already started, but we've just started the work on Dorchester, and actually there will be an open house in Dorchester to discuss some of the preliminary ideas and preliminary analysis of the vulnerabilities of Dorchester next Wednesday, I believe.
Great. And eventually we'll go into every neighborhood, I assume, focusing on the coastal neighborhoods first, and then...
Yes. Well, we're probably not going to do the same kind of detailed neighborhood by neighborhood planning for heat and intense precipitation, because it's a more diffuse problem, and it's sort of dealing with it. There's not a need to deal with it on a sort of detailed sort of block by block or parcel by parcel way, the way that we have to do with coastal flooding.
Sure.
But we are already working on those other two problems and the citywide problems. We've been in some of the neighborhoods to have open houses and discussions already, and we're going to continue to do that. In dealing with heat and precipitation in particular, we're working very closely with our colleagues in the Public Health Commission and with Boston Water and Sewer, because a lot of that comes under their purview, and they've been great partners, and we're going to continue that.
Great. And some of the ideas that come from this, I assume, are sort of the greenscape, the grayscape, you know, having, obviously increasing the tree canopy, having some wetlands protections.
Yes, well, that's all part of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and as I said, we're already working on that and working with our colleagues in other departments and agencies to expand the ongoing efforts and find ways to expand them and make them more effective.
Great. And you mentioned that there will be a community meeting in Dorchester. Has that been part of this process as well in terms of the consulting and the support staff to get out in the neighborhoods, talk about sort of resiliency, talk about climate threats, talk about ways that we should be looking at restructuring neighborhoods to address that?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
We've had similar open house. We've had similar open houses in the developing plans for East Boston, Charlestown, and in South Boston and in downtown. I know Councilor Flynn, you've been attended some of those, and perhaps Councilor Mao, though I don't remember specifically, but I know Councilor Flynn has been at some in the North End, and so yeah, so this is just a continuation of that. This is actually the second open house that we're holding in Dorchester as part of this effort. The first one focused on what are the threats and what are the vulnerable areas. In the second open house next week, we'll be starting to discuss some of the tentative ideas for specific measures that we want to put in place to deal with coastal flooding in Dorchester.
And just briefly, what are some of those strategies? What are some of those specific proposals that we put out?
Well, as in East Boston, Charlestown, and South Boston, it depends very much on the land form, on the ownership, on existing uses. So in some places, it's how do we take existing parks, whether they're city parks or in some cases state parks, and we've been discussing this with our colleagues at the state too about how can we enhance the design of those parks to increase their value in flood protection or in stormwater management. Are there places where we can need to enhance existing seawalls or put in new ones, or can we create new types of green infrastructure that isn't there currently to address the vulnerability to sea level rise and coastal flooding? As I said, the need for the neighborhood planning is because this has to be done at a very detailed level for it to make sense. Great. And we want to make sure that the community, the residents, the businesses and institutions in those neighborhoods that are most directly affected by this kind of planning and most directly affected by the risk of sea level rise and coastal flooding have a chance to weigh in on their ideas, give us their own ideas, and to respond to the various options that we'll be putting forward.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you, Carl. Councilor Flynn, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. And I just had one question. I enjoyed listening to you, and you provided some excellent information. Just want to say thank you for your important work on this issue. As it relates to the South Boston waterfront, are you communicating with development teams that want to develop there and weighing in on, sea level rise in coastal flooding? And are you talking to these potential developers about some of the challenges they might have to undertake as part of their construction planning?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, we did that. We had extensive consultation with the business and real estate community, and of course with the residential community too in South Boston, as we were developing the South Boston plan that we released last year. And those conversations are ongoing. Some of them are structured formally through the requirements that the Boston Planning and Development Agency has integrated into their review, and we of course participate as an active member of that review and in helping to set the standards that we're using, the level of protection that we're looking for. And we are also continuing it in an informal way through both when individual developers want to come in and talk with us, and through some of the various associations and groups of businesses and developers and property owners in South Boston who want to talk with us, because we know that an informed community, and that goes across all sectors, is essential for getting this work done.
Thank you. And just my final question is, Boston Water and Sewer, are they part of that process and discussion as well as it relates to ongoing development in the South Boston waterfront?
Absolutely, absolutely. As I said, they have been part of our planning and steering committees and advisory groups from the very beginning. We also, especially when we think about sea level rise and coastal flooding, we want to make sure that in creating structures that keep coastal flooding out, that we're not creating barriers for getting the stormwater out to the ocean too. So they've been an excellent and fully engaged partner in all of this work.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. So I appreciate the great, thorough overview, Carl. Obviously, this is something that we will be moving to pass on Wednesday. So thank you for your time explaining docket 1404. Welcome, Aldo Guerin from the Parks Department. Great to see you. We are discussing docket number 1520, which is a message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a parkland acquisitions and renovations of communities or park grant awarded by the Mass Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Division of Conservation Services, in the amount not to exceed $400,000 to be administered by the Boston Parks and Recreation Department. Could you give us a brief overview about that grant, and then we may have a question or two?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning about docket number 1520. The City of Boston Parks and Recreation Department was recently awarded a $400,000 grant for Phase 3 of the reconstruction of Harambee Park in Dorchester. As you mentioned, this grant is from the Parkland Acquisitions and Renovations for Communities, a lot of words to get a cute acronym, PARC, grant program, which is run by the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The maximum grant offered is $400,000. Harambee is a 46-acre park with several playing fields arrayed across it. The current reconstruction process seeks to make the field arrangement more efficient and productive to serve more people, and is being done in phases, as this is one of the city's largest parks. In this third phase, we are reconstructing the dedicated football field and adding a multi-purpose practice field. Both fields will be lighted and oriented in a north-south orientation. We're also adding new features to appeal to non-sports oriented users, such as major pathways, major entrance nodes, benches, and seat walls, so that walkers and runners can also use the park. In this and every phase, past and future, we have been and are adding far more trees to a park that has been a vast open field. This makes Harambee a more attractive park, more resilient for users during times of excessive heat, and better able to capture more carbon as the trees grow. Last month, the first of several meetings with the community on Phase 3 design took place. We anticipate beginning construction in the summer of 2020 and completing the project by June of 2021. Therefore, I'm here on behalf of Commissioner Woods to ask for your committee's recommendation to the full council to accept and expend this grant. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Aldo. Is it the football field is going to be turf?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're both going to be natural turf.
Great, that's fantastic. I am a big proponent of that. It took us a while to get one in West Roxbury, but it's the Millennium Park Phase 2 includes the football field, which is great. And how many trees do you think?
I don't have a figure yet for that.
Maybe too early.
Yeah, I don't have a figure for that, but I can get that for you.
Great. And is this for the final phase of Harambee Park's
Oh,
renovation?
no, there are more phases.
How many phases? This is Phase 3.
I think I'm going to estimate or guesstimate it's like 6 or 7. Yeah.
So so we're halfway.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, hey, you know what? And I mean, this is obviously a no-brainer. I don't represent Harambee Park, but I know the field, and it's a great place, and anything we can do to invest. And I think that you, Commissioner Woods, Chief Cook, and the mayor deserve a lot of credit for just the focus on parks and open space. The average Bostonian lives no more than how many minutes away from a park or playground?
Let me think, 10 minutes, yes.
10 minutes, which is one of the best walkable scores, I think, of any city of our size. So this is great. Yeah, accessibility, trees, turf football field. I think there's nothing not to love about this. Pardon the double negative. Do you know if there are water filling stations at Harambee currently? I know that's been something that we've been working for to help decrease single-use plastic bottles.
Well, the first phase was completed this past spring, and we're we're right now underway with constructing Phase 2. I'm not sure about water filling. I think there is water. I know I'm going to mention to the designer that there should be water filling stations when you have fields like this, because a lot of the teams will have water bottles to fill, and
Sure.
it just makes more sense
Yeah.
to use that rather than bring in all sorts of extra plastic bottles
Exactly.
that create waste.
Great. Well, that is all I have. Councilor Flynn, any questions?
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. I just had one follow-up question. I know this will be a tremendous asset to the residents in Dorchester. You mentioned it briefly, but can you tell me some of the plans on making sure that the park is enjoyed by persons with disabilities as well?
Oh, the park is generally flat. I mean, it's, there's minimal, there'll be minimal need for anything like ramps. The entrances are at grade. There's, very little. I think maybe there's and I'm sure that's going to be handled by grading. There's a long central walkway that's being constructed. It's going to be like the spine of the walkway system. And on the western end, I know there's a significant grade change, and I'm sure that through grading that'll be modified so that there'll be no need for these type of switchback ramps that you see, which are kind of not as attractive as something where you have a nice long curve in a park like this.
When we're planning parks, do we ask for recommendations from the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities, just to give them an opportunity to give their input on what would be more helpful to persons with disabilities, and maybe provide a few recommendations on how we can improve a park or make it better for everybody?
Right. Well, we obviously always design with the ADA guidelines in mind, but every 7 years, in order to maintain our eligibility for state grants like this and federal grants, the city puts together an open space plan. Mm-hmm. And adjunct to that open space plan is, let's see, it's a section 508, I forget the exact number, but it's a plan that discusses, access, improvement for disability access. Mm-hmm. Throughout this, the park system. And so we engaged very much with the Commission for Persons with Disabilities on that. And it's a pretty thorough, we go pretty thoroughly through our system, looking at what features are not accessible, what features are, and try to target every one of our reconstruction projects to eliminating any barriers.
Yeah, thank you. That's an issue that I'm very concerned with, is making sure that I love our parks. I think they're beautiful. We do a tremendous job with our parks. I'm always looking for other ways to make them more enjoyable as well for persons with disabilities. So that's a big issue for me. And so I want to say thank you for your work on that particular issue.
Thank you.
And my only concern is, I know I'll have to talk to the commissioner. We speak frequently about it, but we don't have enough parks in Chinatown. It's a very small neighborhood. Right. And that's always been an issue for the residents. So just long-term planning, if we can continue talking about what we're going to do for the residents of Chinatown as it relates to parks and our open space as well.
I know from participating in efforts like there wasn't any ability to follow through, but for example, at the exit, for the Central Artery Tunnel near Chinatown, there was a whole planning effort to create, development parcels that could be used for, residential, commercial, et cetera. I think these parcels would be under Department of Transportation, and BPDA worked with them on planning, developing an RFP, and we were very much involved in trying to make sure that, there's requirements for additional open space for Chinatown. So we look at every opportunity. We're hoping that, in the future, if there's air rights developed over the Pike, that those also are going to be focused on addressing the open space needs as well.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be a top priority for me as well, so thank you for your concern about that and your work
Yes.
on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, Councillor Flynn. Although that is all the questions we have, obviously I'll be urging my colleagues to accept and expend docket 1520 at our final
Great.
council meeting on Wednesday. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Is that renderings of the park that you brought with you?
Yes.
Just
yeah.
love to.
Let me, yeah. Oh, there we go. So these are, this is already constructed, Phase 1. Phase 2 is underway now, mostly soccer fields and a rain garden. And these are future phases here. And this is the phase that is the subject of the current request for accept and expend. This is the football field. Right now it's oriented this way. We're going to orient it in a north-south direction. This is the practice field. You can have soccer, lacrosse, football practice. These are primary pathways. This is a secondary pathway. This is kind of a promenade type of loop there. And these are the entrance nodes that we'll be developing as well.
Great. Looks fantastic.
Yeah,
Right.
and additional trees, of course.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you again. Appreciate your taking the time to explain that to us. Thank you. Finally, Mr. Bradley, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are here now for the final grant discussion for this morning's hearing is docket 1588, which is a message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $170,000 in the form of a grant for the Clean Vehicle Project awarded by the Mass Department of Energy Resources to be administered by Central Fleet Management. Can you tell us a little bit about docket 1588?
Sure. Thanks for having me here this morning, councilors. Mainly we're looking to do upfits on 15 existing vans in the city fleet with aftermarket hybrid systems. They're bolt-on systems. Installs can be completed in as little as 24 hours to minimize downtime for our departments. And the vans belong to various departments, excuse me, including BTD, the Age Strong Commission, and the Parks Department. We already have 24 hybrid vans in the fleet, and we're excited to hopefully have the opportunity to upfit more vans with hybrid systems to help make our fleet run cleaner and greener.
It's great. So we have 24 currently vans. These will be 15 more. My simple math is about $11,000 per van to do the upgrade, which seems high, but can you translate what that's going to mean not only for the positive environmental impact, but fuel efficiency?
Sure. We save 28% on gasoline in miles driven per gallon with these systems from what we found, and we also achieve a 22% reduction on greenhouse gas emissions compared to a standard van.
Do you know how much, and if you don't know this, it's kind of in the weeds, but it's just for my own edification, and it helps prove my point that every environmentalist or every fiscal conservative ought to be an environmentalist. Do you know how much we would spend per year on fuel for the average vehicle?
I don't off the top of my head. I can definitely get you.
Yeah, because I would venture a guess that it may, the 28% savings per gallon may not equal $11,000 in 1 year, but I bet it sure as heck does in a year and a half or 20 months. So that's something that, we're going to save money. How many total vans do we have in the fleet right now?
210.
All right, so we have a lot of work to do, but this will get us up to 40 vans. And this doesn't make it electric, it makes it similar to like a Prius, I guess, type technology, so the hybrid. Do we have, how many electric cars do we have in the, or vehicles do we have in the fleet?
Currently, we have about 20 electric vehicles in the
Yeah.
fleet. We're working with the Environment Department now on some climate action goals to hopefully electrify the entire light-duty fleet by 2030.
By 2030. Well, as someone who drives an electric car, I cannot extol the virtues enough. And I'm also paying less for an electric car than I was for my last car, which was probably the sticker price was $15,000 less expensive. So I'm paying for a much better car, the same exact price, and saving substantial amount of money on gas. Okay, so we had a similar grant. We passed on November 20th a grant of $63,000. I think it was the same thing, so that would probably have been for 5 or 6 additional vans. So we will get these appropriations in sort of willy-nilly throughout the year and just have to take action. But this is helpful. I don't have any other questions. I think it's the timeline of the installation. You said it can be done in as few as 24 hours.
Yes.
So will we just, as soon as the council votes, will we get to work on it?
Yep, we can start sending them out as soon as we get approval.
That's great.
I would also mention that the model years in the vans are 2017 to 2019, so we're going to keep these in the fleet for at least 8 to 10 more years. So with that 28% reduction, we're going to see a significant payback in the future.
I mean, that'll pay for itself, more than pay for itself twice just in fuel costs. Forget about the greenhouse gas emission decrease by 22%. So I'm really excited about this. Keep up the great work. I think this is one of those small actions we can take that can have a profound impact, not only on climate, but also on efficiency, also on saving money for taxpayers. So well done, Matt. Appreciate this. I will be enthusiastically asking my colleagues to support this on Wednesday as well as the other things. I have no further questions. I don't see anyone else. Has anyone signed up for public testimony, Michelle? All right. Well, that is good. Look at that. We're only a couple minutes behind. This concludes the City Council's Committee on Environment, Sustainability, and Parks hearings on dockets 1404, 1520, and 1588. We are hereby adjourned.